Kay Brothers was founded by Herbert and Fred Kay in 1890. Herbert was my grandfather and Fred was my great-uncle. They had reasonably extensive orchards. It was a real mixed farm, but wine was their primary business.
One night to be confused, one night to speed up truth. We had a promise made, 4 hands and then away, both under influence.
They planted vineyards, they built a winery in 1895. Block 6 was planted in 1892. It was a block that was consistent in yield. It always gave good wines, fine, lovely, rich Shiraz wines. A unique piece of vineyard, very, very special. It's wonderful to know that its history from the day of planting to today is all documented. It's a very rare thing. I celebrated my first vintage as a qualified winemaker at the Barossa Cooperative Winery in the Barossa Valley. I worked there until 1966. Then I took off overseas and spent nearly 3.5 years roaming the world. My first vintage back here was 1970, and I've been here ever since.
I travelled quite a bit abroad and I was drawn back to McLaren Vale because we've got it all. Beautiful vineyards, beautiful food and wine culture, the beaches, the influence from the ocean. It's just a beautiful part of the world. And I was drawn to the winery because of the reputation, I guess, that Kay's commands, not only in McLaren Vale but in the Australian wine industry. Kay Brothers make these proudly McLaren Vale wines that truly do express their terroir. It was an absolute honour to be entrusted with Block 6. It's such a special vineyard. Not only one of the oldest vineyards in McLaren Vale, but in the world. Block 6 really has stood the test of time. Many generations of the Kay family have nurtured it, and now we're really custodians. Each individual vine has its own growth habit, and that way we get different flavours, different tannins, and then when we put the wine together as one, we get harmonious complexity, and it just makes the wine quite unique and very interesting. So Block 6, it has a certain charm and it draws you back. Block 6 is our icon vineyard and our icon wine. Everything that we do at Kay Brothers is, the pinnacle is Block 6, and that everything else filters down from it. So Block 6 really dictates terms. The wine's very balanced, and you get amazing concentration, but you get complexity and sophistication at the same time. A real depth of flavour from the old vine character.
Lovely gnarled old vines, most of them very healthy still, give us wonderful fruit, but we're using the same basket press, the same pressing regime. In 1984 I kept the fruit separate and made a Shiraz in the style that was sort of popular in those days. It's got 4 sort of soil zones, and the fruit ripens slightly differently on each zone. You get slightly different characters, which in the fermenting tanks each will look different. It's the beauty of the block, a very intangible thing. You can't add much to it other than they started it. We want to keep that piece of vineyard in its best state we can. It's a pretty healthy, wonderful old piece of vineyard. Well, Block 6 sort of was a survivor. It was referred to sort of in 1984 and thereabouts as the pumpkin patch. But going back to the original Block 6, which covered a much larger area, he always regarded it with pride. It does take a lot more work to look after it, with careful hand pruning, careful attention to your typer and dieback issues in it, but it keeps on going on. We look at keeping the soil in good order, because after all, when you have a crop on something for, well, it's 125 years now, it's a pretty tall order to manage that piece of ground thoroughly and properly. It should, with careful management, last for many aeons more.
Of course, there's some real challenges with an old vineyard like Block 6. Each vine needs a different approach. You have to assess it on a vine by vine decision. We have to put a lot of attention, a lot of handwork into the vines. They're traditional techniques which have been used here at Kay's for decades, and that way we're hoping to express what we've grown in the vineyard in the bottle. At the moment, I'm the custodian of this vineyard, but there's been many before me and there'll be many after me, so that's my real job, is to nurture it and get it through the tough seasons, and then hopefully improve things that need it, and then pass it on to the next generation, so that we're still talking about Block 6 25, 50, maybe 100 years from now.
This is something that people don't realise about Australian red wines, is just how long they live, how long they may take to reach their peak. And to have had a block now that this is just purely a single piece of vineyard making a particular wine year after year is a fairly unique thing. There are not many wines of that sort of ilk in Australia.
While the crowd is waiting for the final kiss.
So the 2017 vintage is an amazing milestone for Block 6. It's vintage 125. And for me, the 2017 vintage is about poise and balance, and hopefully you'll enjoy that when you try the wine. We're not trying to change anything, but we're always trying to express the vineyard's character, and we carry that through the winery and into the bottle, and ultimately to the table, to the glass. And that's what we're trying to do, is express this beautiful vineyard in this amazing wine. Oh, it's an amazing honour.
Now wait hands.
Well, the uniqueness of the wine is it's that piece of ground. You can't get away from that. It's just unique in that site. What makes it special is a bit undefinable. Something that I can't put a hand on. It's just that place.
Ultimately, you do it for the consumer, and if you know that they've genuinely had a really amazing, enjoyable experience, it's reassuring to know that all of the hard work and the sacrifice that went into making that wine, it really was worth it, and that's the ultimate reward.
The waiting hands. Before we get tired.